The giant cowboy found a baby at the gallows, and the widow begged him to forgive her. The gallows creaked in the gray dawn, the noose still wet from last night's rain, as Jonah Creed rode into Gray Hollow with the slow, heavy rhythm of a man who had seen too many endings. His horse's breath rose like smoke, hooves crunching against frost-bitten dirt. He wasn't looking for ghosts, but the place was full of them. The scaffold loomed in silence, and beneath it lay something that didn't belong to death at all. A scrap of red cloth moving in the wind. Jonah swung down from his saddle, one hand on his revolver, and crouched low. The cry came faint and desperate. It wasn't cloth. It was a baby, half buried under straw, tiny hands trembling against the cold. Jonah froze. In all his years of war and wandering, he'd never heard anything cut through him like that sound. "Easy now," he murmured, voice barely human. He lifted the child, wrapping his coat around it, feeling warmth fight its way back into those little bones. Then came the footsteps, a woman's shoes on wet boards. He turned. A figure in black stood near the church steps, shawl drawn, face hidden, but posture broken. "You shouldn't have touched him," she said, voice trembling as though it might shatter. Jonah's gaze stayed hard. "You left a baby under a noose. Seems someone had to." She took a step closer. "It isn't mine." "Then whose?" "The man they hanged," she whispered. The gallows rope swung above them like a sermon no one wanted to hear. "I was the one who pulled the lever." Jonah didn't blink. "You the widow?" She nodded slowly. "Of the man he killed." The child whimpered, and Jonah looked down. "You're telling me justice took the wrong one?" "I'm telling you I can't tell anymore." The wind blew harder, carrying the scent of rain and iron. Jonah wrapped the baby tighter, jaws set. "What's his name?" They never gave him one. Jonah's eyes flicked to the gallows, then back to her. "Then he'll live without it until he earns one." He turned toward his horse, cradling the infant close. The widow called after him. "Where are you taking him?" Jonah stopped but didn't look back. "Anywhere that don't hang its future by mistake." The baby coughed softly, and the sound was small enough to silence the whole street. Somewhere behind him, the church bell tolled once, slow, hollow, and final. Jonah Creed didn't pray, but that morning, he almost did. The sheriff's office leaned like a tired man against the wind, one window cracked, a flag half frozen in the dirt. Jonah pushed through the door with the baby wrapped inside his coat. The sheriff, gray-bearded and slow, looked up from a whiskey bottle. "Creed," he muttered, "you drag trouble wherever you ride." Jonah set the child on the desk, the tiny sound of breathing louder than the ticking clock. "Found him under your gallows," he said. "You hang his father last night?" The sheriff's hand trembled. "Wasn't my choice. Jury said guilty." "And the widow?" "Said she wanted it done quick." The door opened again. Clara stepped inside, her veil gone, face pale but steady. Jonah turned, eyes like cold iron. "You gonna tell him what you left in the dirt?" The sheriff blinked. "What's he mean, Clara?" Her lips shook. "I couldn't bury the child. The town would have called it sin." Jonah's jaw clenched. Town already did its sin. The baby stirred, a faint cry escaping, and the old sheriff wiped his eyes. "Lord, forgive us," he whispered. "That man might have been innocent." "He was," Clara said softly. "He stole bread to feed his boy. I believed the men who lied about him, and when I saw him drop, I thought justice was done. Then I heard that baby cry, and it was like his soul came back to ask me why. Jonah picked up the child again, his shadow stretching across the floorboards. "You can't fix what's dead," he said, "but you can keep what's living from dying next." He walked past her toward the door, but Clara followed. "Let me help," she pleaded. "You can't outrun guilt alone." "Ain't trying to outrun it," he said. "Just don't want it killing him too." "Then let me carry part of it." Jonah stopped, the silence heavy enough to crack. "You want to carry something?" he said finally. "Carry his name." "What is it? Doesn't have one yet?" She hesitated. "Then let him have mine. Call him Thomas." Jonah's voice softened. Thomas Creed don't sound half bad. Outside, snow started to fall again, coating the gallows like forgiveness, trying to hide what it couldn't erase. Jonah pulled the brim of his hat low and nodded to the sheriff. "If the law asks where we went, tell it we're fixin' what it broke." He stepped into the white morning, the widow close behind, the child between them. A new weight neither could lay down. By dusk, the road turned to mud and mist, and the wind carried the bitter smell of smoke from the valley behind them. Jonah led the way, his horse steady under the weight of 3 souls, one small enough to fit inside his coat, one trailing behind with her grief tied to every step. They stopped near a half-burned barn, the last light bleeding across the sky. Jonah dismounted, built a fire, and said nothing. Clara knelt across from him, the flames painting her face gold and red. She looked older than the morning, younger than her guilt. "He's quiet," she whispered, glancing at the baby. "That's what peace sounds like," Jonah said, poking the fire with a stick. "Or exhaustion." The wind snapped at the flames, sending embers into the night. Clara reached for the child, hesitating before lifting him from Jonah's coat. "I used to pray I'd never hold another baby again," she said softly. "Now I don't want to let go." Jonah leaned back against his saddle. "Life's got a mean sense of humor." "You ever pray?" she asked. "Not since God quit answering." She smiled faintly. "Maybe you quit listening first." Jonah didn't reply. The fire popped, and for a moment, all that existed was the sound of breath and burning wood. After a while, Clara spoke again, her voice small but steady. "His name was Samuel, my husband. Bishop told me he robbed that wagon for gold, said he shot the driver. I never saw the body. I just believed it." Jonah's eyes stayed on the fire. "And now you don't?" "Now I know Bishop's men took the wagon themselves. Sheriff found a medallion in the ashes, Samuel's, near the driver's horse. He died trying to stop them." Jonah's grip tightened on his rifle. "Bishop still running the town?" "He owns it." Jonah's jaw worked like a ticking clock. "He always did." Clara looked up. "You knew him?" "Worked his land once. Didn't like what I saw growing on it." "You'll go back," she said quietly. "You'll kill him." Jonah looked at her then, his face hard in the firelight. "Not if you ask me not to." She didn't answer. The baby stirred, cooing softly, and she pressed him close. Jonah stood tossing another log on the fire. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we ride early." She nodded, watching the flames swallow the darkness. "You think we'll make it?" "If we don't," Jonah said, "at least we're riding the right way." The wind howled down from the mountains before dawn, dragging a sheet of sleet across the plains. By the time Jonah and Clara reached the timberline, the sky had turned white, the air thick with the taste of snow. Jonah found a crumbling hunting cabin, half buried under pine boughs, and kicked the door open. Inside, dust and silence. "Get the fire started," he said. Clara knelt by the hearth, hands trembling as she struck flint. The baby whimpered from inside Jonah's coat, his tiny breaths fogging the cold air. Jonah stripped off his gloves, rubbing warmth back into the child's hands. "He's freezing," Clara whispered. "We'll fix that." He pulled a wool blanket from the saddlebag and wrapped it around them both. The flames caught, throwing gold light across the cabin. Clara stared at him through the glow. "You didn't have to save us." Jonah shrugged. "Didn't figure I had the right not to." She smiled faintly, tears tracing the soot on her cheeks. "You sound like a man trying to make peace with something." "Maybe I am." Outside, thunder rolled like a cannon, shaking snow from the roof. Jonah fed another log to the fire and sat down, his shoulder brushing hers. "You ever wonder what forgiveness costs?" he asked quietly. "Everything," she said. "And if you can't afford it, then you give what you got." The storm roared louder, rattling the shutters. Jonah stared into the flames. "When I was young, I did worse things than any man bishops ever hung. Thought I was fighting for good. Turns out good men die the same way bad ones do. Fast and forgettable." Clara looked at him. "You saved a life today. Maybe that's what lasts." Jonah shook his head. "Not if Bishop finds us." She swallowed hard. "He won't." "He will," Jonah said flatly. "Men like him always do." Lightning split the sky, and for an instant, the cabin glowed white. Clara reached for the baby, clutching him close as thunder rolled again. "Then we'll face him," she said. "Together." Jonah watched her, the defiance in her eyes catching something inside him he thought long dead. "You ever held a gun?" he asked. "Once." "You'll hold one again." He handed her his spare revolver. "Tomorrow the storm clears. That's when the riders will come." She nodded, pulling the blanket tighter. Jonah stared at the fire until it blurred. "Sleep while you can," he said. "Mercy don't come easy." The storm broke by sunrise, leaving the valley glazed in ice and silence. Jonah saddled his horse, testing the rifle's bolt as Clara fed the baby with a bottle warmed near the coals. Her eyes were rimmed red from a night without sleep. "You think they'll come today?" she asked. Jonah didn't answer, just cinched the saddle tighter and scanned the horizon through the window's frost-streaked glass. "They never wait long," he said finally. "Bishop don't like ghosts walking with his name still in their mouth." Clara stood, the baby swaddled in her shawl. "I keep asking myself why you stayed." Jonah's gaze didn't shift. "Guess I couldn't stand the idea of him growing up thinking the world don't give second chances." She hesitated. "And me?" He turned to face her. "You're the proof I ain't wrong yet." The sound came then, distant at first. Hooves breaking the crust of frozen ground. Jonah moved to the door, eyes narrowing. Across the valley floor, 5 riders cut through the haze like wolves, torches burning against the snow. Clara's breath hitched. "What'll we do?" "What we came for," Jonah said. He slung the rifle over his shoulder and stepped into the light. The baby began to cry, and Clara's voice trembled. "They'll kill you." "Not before they try." He mounted his horse, the cold air biting through his coat. Clara ran after him. "If you die out there, that baby loses the only decent man he's ever known." Jonah's eyes softened. "Then don't let me die for nothing." He pressed the rifle into her hands. "If I fall, you ride north. Follow the river until it bends west. There's a trading post in 3 days' time. Show them this." He handed her a tarnished badge. "U.S. Marshal," she read, stunned. "You were..." "Once," he said, turning away, before I forgot what it meant. The riders were close now, Bishop's men, faces hidden behind scarves and greed. Jonah rode out from the cabin, stopping in the open field. He raised one hand, calling out through the wind. "Tell Bishop he can have my sins, but not theirs." A rifle cracked from below, splintering a fence post near his leg. Jonah drew his gun and fired back once, the echo rolling across the valley. The baby's cry rose from the cabin, soft but clear, carried on the wind like something holy. The men turned their horses toward the sound. Jonah's heart stopped cold. "They heard him," he muttered. "Then I reckon mercy's done waitin'." The first bullet struck the log wall beside Clara's head, splintering wood into her hair. She ducked, clutching the baby tight, whispering prayers into the fabric of his blanket. Outside, gunfire rolled like thunder. Jonah's shout cut through it all, low, fierce, steady. "Stay down." He moved between the trees like a shadow, every shot deliberate, each breath measured. 2 riders fell before they knew where the bullets came from. Then one got close enough to see him. "Creed!" the man shouted, firing wild. Jonah's shoulder exploded with heat. He stumbled, gritting his teeth, fired back once, and the man's scream vanished into the wind. The smell of gunpowder filled the clearing, sharp as iron. Jonah crawled behind a boulder, blood soaking his coat. He checked the chamber, 2 bullets left. Voices echoed below. "He's hit. Take the woman." Jonah's chest tightened. Clara. He forced himself up, vision blurring, and stumbled toward the cabin. Inside, Clara had found the revolver Jonah left her. Her hands shook, but her eyes were calm. When the door burst open, she fired once, clean, perfect, and the man fell at her feet. She gasped, then looked down at her shaking fingers. "I did what I had to," she whispered. The baby cried again, louder now. Jonah reached the porch, barely standing. "You did more than that," he rasped. "You stopped running." Another gunshot whined past, grazing the post near her head. Jonah grabbed her arm, pulled her inside, and kicked the door shut. "There's still 2 out there," he said. "We can't hold this." "Then we ride." He nodded. "When I say." He reloaded with trembling hands, blood dripping on the floorboards. Clara looked at him, sweat on his brow, eyes blazing even as his strength failed. "You'll bleed out," she said. "Not if they do first." He kicked open the back door and fired twice, hitting one man square in the chest. The last rider turned and fled toward the ridge, shouting for Bishop. Jonah lowered the gun, breath ragged. "He'll bring more." "Then we keep moving," Clara said, gripping his arm. "You can't." "I can if you lead." He looked at her, saw the fear, the fire, the promise. "You sure about this?" "You saved his life," she said. "Now let me save yours." He smiled through blood-stained teeth. "You talk like a preacher." "No," she whispered. "Just someone tired of graves." Outside, the snow began again, soft and slow, covering the bodies like forgiveness. Jonah holstered his gun. "Let's ride before the storm remembers what it's hidin'." By nightfall, the storm had turned to freezing rain, and every hoofbeat sounded like a heartbeat trying to quit. They reached a narrow canyon where an old chapel leaned against the rock, its bell half buried in snow. Jonah nearly fell from the saddle when he dismounted, his face pale, blood seeping dark through his coat. Clara caught him under the arm, guiding him through the creaking doors. Inside, the place smelled of dust and cold candles, the pews splintered, the altar broken, but still standing. She laid him on the floor near the hearth and tore strips from her skirt to bind his shoulder. He groaned, eyes half open. "You should have left me," he muttered. And go where? She said. Every road worth taking got your footprints on it. He laughed weakly, a dry rasp. You learned that from preachin' or survivin'? Both. The baby stirred in his cradle of blankets, soft whimpers echoing onto the rafters. Clara fed him slowly, her hands steady now. Jonah watched her, a faint smile under the pain. You're stronger than you look. And you're more human than you pretend. Don't ruin my reputation, he murmured. Outside, wind moaned through the gaps, carrying the sound of distant riders. Clara froze. They're coming. Jonah forced himself upright. Can't ride tonight. They'll find us by morning. Then we make our stand here. He shook his head. You don't win fights with prayers. She stood, jaw tight. Then maybe I'll start with one anyway. She moved to the altar and struck a match, lighting the single candle left unbroken. Its flame flickered weakly, fighting the cold. What are you asking for? Jonah asked. Not victory, she whispered. Just mercy. The word hung in the air like breath in winter. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the wall. Ain't sure he's listening. He is, she said. Maybe not for you, but for him. She nodded toward the baby. Jonah's chest rose slow, his breathing calmer now. He'll never remember this. Then we will. She sat beside him, pressing her hand over his. If we die here, let it be for something kinder than revenge. Jonah looked at her hand, scarred, trembling, real. And for the first time in years, he whispered something that might have been a prayer. The candle burned brighter, its flame reflecting in his eyes like dawn threatening the dark. If mercy's coming, he said softly, it better ride fast. The morning broke red over the canyon, the kind of light that made everything look half alive. Jonah woke to the sound of hooves echoing down the ridge, slow and deliberate, the rhythm of a man who believed the world belonged to him. He pushed himself upright, wincing, blood already seeping through his bandage. Clara stood by the doorway, the baby wrapped tight against her chest. It's him, she whispered. Jonah nodded, gripping his rifle. Bishop don't ride without an audience. Outside, 10 riders spread across the valley floor. Bishop at the center, coat black as coal, beard trimmed, eyes full of old prophet. Creed, he shouted. You've got something of mine. Jonah stepped into the open, the cold biting his skin. Didn't know you owned babies, Bishop. Laughter rippled through the men, mean and hollow. Bishop leaned forward in his saddle. You used to work for me. You know how this ends. Yeah, Jonah said, with you in the dirt. That child's blood is owed, Bishop growled. His father stole from me. I paid for the rope that hung him. Then you bought yourself a curse. Bishop's smile vanished. Give him to me, and I'll let you walk away. Jonah cocked his rifle. You ain't bought mercy in your whole life. The first shot cracked the air. Jonah fired back before the sound even faded, dropping a man clean from his horse. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through snow and stone, the chapel windows exploding behind him. Clara screamed, diving for cover with the baby. Jonah ran low through the smoke, his shoulder blazing with pain. He counted every bullet, every heartbeat, until the world narrowed to noise and breath. Bishop dismounted, shouting, "Bring me the widow! Bring me the child!" Jonah turned, blood dripping into his eyes, and saw 2 riders breaking for the chapel. He fired once, missed, then twice, and both men fell. The 3rd bullet struck him high in the ribs, knocking him to his knees. Clara ran out, firing Jonah's revolver until the hammer clicked empty. The valley went still. Bishop stood 10 paces away, reloading calmly. I told you, Creed, he said. Justice don't come cheap. Jonah raised his head, voice ragged. Neither does forgiveness. He fired his last shot. The bullet hit Bishop square in the chest, and the man staggered backward, clutching at the hole where his heart used to be. He fell face first into the snow, the red spreading fast. Jonah dropped his gun, collapsing beside him, whispering, "It's over. Let it be over." The wind rose again, carrying the sound of a baby crying into the new morning. The valley was silent after the gunfire, the kind of silence that comes only when the earth's had enough of blood. Snow fell slow and heavy, covering the bodies like a blanket meant for the forgotten. Clara knelt beside Jonah, her hands red with his blood, her breath sharp in the cold. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her scarf against his wound. His eyes fluttered open, finding her through the blur. "He's dead," he murmured. "Bishop's gone," she said. "You killed him." Jonah coughed, the sound breaking like gravel. "Ain't much of a victory." "It's not for you," she said softly. "It's for him." She nodded toward the baby swaddled in blankets near the altar ruins. Jonah smiled weakly. "Guess I finally earned the right to rest." "Not yet," Clara said. "Not until you see the sunrise." She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close as the wind moved through the valley, tugging at their clothes like invisible hands. Jonah's eyes drifted to the gallows in the distance, faint and gray against the horizon. "That rope was built for men like me," he said. "But it's men like you that burn it down," she replied. He tried to laugh, but winced instead. "You got fire in you, widow." "Not anymore," she said. "Just light." Hours passed before he stirred again. The storm cleared, leaving the world quiet and white. He sat up slowly, every muscle trembling, and looked toward the hill where they had buried Bishop and the men who followed him. The graves stood unmarked, only simple mounds of snow beneath the morning light. Clara carried the baby out of the chapel, his small face bright against the cold. Jonah rose to his feet, leaning on his rifle like an old friend. "He'll never know what happened here," he said. "Then let him live like the world's worth saving," Clara replied. The wind swept through again, bending the grass, humming over the graves like a hymn no one had words for. Jonah looked at her, then at the child. "He's got your eyes," he said. "No," she whispered, smiling faintly. "He's got yours, full of trouble and hope." Jonah chuckled under his breath. "Then God help him." They stood together in the silence that followed, the valley wide and empty, the sun breaking low over the snow. For the first time, Jonah Creed didn't feel the weight of ghosts pressing on his shoulders. Just the warmth of a woman who forgave him before he forgave himself, and a child who'd never have to hang beneath another man's sins. Spring crept into the valley like a secret too gentle to announce itself. The snow melted from the graves first, then from the chapel roof, then from the hills that had once echoed with gunfire. Jonah Creed stood by the old fence, hands rough from work that didn't kill a man, but healed him instead. Behind him, Clara hummed softly as she laid clothes on a line strung between two oak trees. The baby, Thomas Creed now, by her insistence, crawled in the grass, chasing a blue feather the wind kept just out of reach. Jonah smiled, tipping his hat against the morning glare. The world was warm again, and for the first time in years, he wasn't watching for riders. Clara walked toward him, her eyes tired but alive. "Fence'll be done by noon," he said, driving one last post into the earth. "Didn't think you'd ever stop building things meant to keep people out," she teased. "Guess I'm learning to build what keeps 'em in." She handed him a cup of coffee, steam curling between their fingers. "He's got your stubborn streak," she said, nodding at the baby. He's got your heart, Jonah replied. The air was quiet except for birds returning, the land remembering how to breathe again. You ever think about going back? She asked. Back where? Anywhere you were before this. He looked out toward the ridge. Ain't nothing back there but names carved in wood. I'll stay where the livin' are. She smiled faintly. Then maybe you finally found home. Jonah took off his hat, running a calloused hand through his hair. Home, he echoed. That's a word I forgot belonged to me. Clara slipped her arm through his. Then take it back. They stood in silence, watching Thomas toddle toward the light spilling through the barn door. The morning sun touched everything gold. The fence posts, the hills, even the worn gallows beam Jonah had torn down and turned into the farm's new gate. He stared at it a long time. Funny, he said. Same wood once held a rope. Now it holds a latch. Maybe that's what forgiveness looks like, Clara whispered. Jonah nodded, the weight in his chest lighter than it had ever been. Maybe so. The wind carried the faint smell of cedar and spring grass, and somewhere beyond the ridge, a church bell rang. A sound not of warning, but of peace. Jonah looked at Clara and smiled. Let's raise him better than we were raised. She kissed his hand. We already are. Thank you for traveling these roads with me. If stories of mercy, courage, and second chances speak to your heart, another tale waits for you right here on Crimson West.